Hello everybody, thank you for joining me for this video. My name is Tyler Ellison, and tonight I want to talk to you all really about my channeling process, because the methodology I use for channeling has changed and evolved as I have changed and evolved as a person. And I'm going to give you all a little bit of a rundown about how I got involved with channeling and how my life has changed as a result of it. And I'm not sure exactly, how all this information will come through. I really just want to share with you what I've learned and experienced, because I feel it will be of benefit to those of you who are really working to merge with your own higher selves, because that's fundamentally the point of channeling, which is what I'm going to get into. So, I was first exposed to channeling through Bashar, who is channeled by Daryl Anka, and I accessed that information at a really pivotal time in my life when I was going through many different changes, a lot of challenges, a lot of dark themes. I was a very negative person, right? I was on a very destructive path, really just trying to fill a hole in myself. I felt insecure, I felt empty, I felt just ashamed to be alive. And I was experimenting with different spiritual tools, technologies, while also still deeply struggling with all of those issues. And I started using the information Bashar gave, and I essentially had a Kundalini awakening. I don't know what else to call it. I had an activation of some sort, and it caused a very powerful shift in my life. I started to have very mystical experiences regularly, seeing synchronicities all over the place, seeing energy physically with my eyes, seeing other beings physically with my eyes, and I was essentially in an ecstatic state. And this was very entertaining to my friends. They had never seen anything like this, and very concerning to my family, because very traditional family, and this was very out of the ordinary, very uncharacteristic of my previous behavior. So this sort of sent me on a quest, really, where everything changed. I moved geographic locations within about a month of this awakening process, and I ended up in a position where I created for myself, with the assistance of my family, an environment where I got to really just discover more about who I am, where I got to discover more about what my purpose is, and really why I'm here and what I want to do. So in that year-long program, it was kind of like a retreat and a reintegration process. I started studying things like Reiki. I started studying things like acupuncture, herbalism, health, nutrition. I really exposed myself in that year to all of the things that I resonated with on a heart level. And I know that that is a very fortunate position to be in. I know not everyone gets to have a whole year to find themselves, but that was, what the universe had in store for me, and that's what I went through. It was sort of like a year-long retreat, and during that retreat, I started practicing channeling. I just gave it a go because I felt that what I received from Bashar was just so healing and transformational that it would behoove me to learn how to do that, not just for myself, but also for other people. So I began the practice of channeling, and I would do it just for some friends. I would do it sometimes for myself, and I would just kind of connect to whatever I felt was calling me. So at first this was Pleiadian beings. I started channeling them, and I got some hits. And what I mean by that is the information that came through was factual information, information I, as Tyler, was previously unaware of. So that was really how I sort of determined for myself what I was doing was of value. It wasn't just some, fluffy feel-good message. It was something that was specific to reality in an accurate way. So I continued to pursue it, and I began having experiences with extraterrestrial beings as a result of foregoing that, or not foregoing, but undertaking that, practicing that. I had a craft encounter with multiple people, and it was a triangular craft, which, ironically is also what Darryl Anka, who channels Bashar, experienced when Bashar first made contact with him, and I too had a triangular UFO sighting with multiple witnesses. It was in Connecticut. I was with my coworkers, and we were driving back home from a day of work. And, after I saw that, I started to take what I was doing a little bit more seriously. I started to recognize that this experience of life shifting was all synchronistically organized to guide me ultimately to the point that I'm at now, which is a place where I'm essentially doing everything I can to really just merge with my own higher self. So as I continued my pursuits of following my different passions and things that resonated with me, I began to come across different systems of spiritual technology. So I began to practice things like Qigong. This comes from the Taoist tradition, and this is all about the idea of body-centric spiritual transformation. So I began really developing a very dedicated spiritual practice to assist me in my channeling. And I still practice the Qigong. I still do it to this day, every day. I don't miss days at all. It's like an essential everyday thing. And the reason for that is the channeling for me has become an everyday thing. Just about every day of the week, I am doing channeling sessions for people. And one of the messages I got from my guide that I channel, Ryuk, is that in order for more information to come forth, I, as Tyler, must apply the information given in my own unique way. I'm not forced to do that, but the idea is, it's like, if you want more, you have to eat what's on your plate. So I, as a channel for these beings, am tasked sort of with the responsibility of applying the message, practicing, what is being preached, to use that phrase. And in addition to this too, I find that not just in a spiritual sense, this information is requiring application, but also in my personal life. In other words, how I treat myself, how I treat people, how I relate to the world. There's a degree of refinement that's, I find, required to really deepen the relationship with the channeled being, because ultimately we are merging with the beings that we're channeling. Every time Ryuk is channeled through me, I am dissolving into him. Really, I'm dissolving into the energy. And if I live a life or conduct myself in a way that's contrary to that energy, it becomes challenging to channel. It becomes challenging to receive new information. It becomes challenging to get clarity in the channeling state. So in order to really maintain that connection, I am essentially tasked with really walking the highest path available to me that I can possibly walk. So to really assist myself in doing that, I have taken up these different practices, in particular the Qigong and the Taoism, to really stabilize that evolution and to accelerate that evolution. And I also recently have gotten into high magical techniques. So these are techniques that involve invoking angels to increase your psychic perception, to evolve your consciousness, ultimately so you can fully merge with your higher self, so you can really embody the higher self in all that you do. And eventually, in these paths, the ego dissolves into the higher self, and a sort of cosmic perspective is then the default normal perspective. That awareness of source, that awareness of divinity is then ever present. It's unconditional, it's omnipotent for the practitioner. And I know a lot of people out there that watch my videos, you know, are fascinated by channeled beings. There's many people out there who desire to channel, and I'm making this video because I want to let you know that it's a skill anybody can learn, but it's not necessarily a skill that's just a given thing. And what I mean by that is, just like any skill, like basketball or the guitar, it's practiced and it's refined. And just how there's many different exercises and techniques that can help you refine the skill, channeling's no different. There's all types of things that can help one to refine their skill of channeling. And for me, that has been daily spiritual practice, both energetic practices through the Qigong and magical practices through the angelic work that I practice. And without those things, it is totally possible to evolve your consciousness. It's totally possible to merge with the higher self. However, it's much more challenging, because these practices ultimately strengthen your aura, they strengthen your energy body, and they assist you in becoming resilient. So when you encounter something negative or when you encounter a life challenge, you're not shaken. So you can maintain that higher perspective and that clarity, so you can, again, conduct yourself in a way that represents the channeled being and in a way that represents your own divinity. And as you live your life in a way that mirrors the divine nature of the higher self, you then become a perpetual energy match for the guide. So when you call the guide forth, they're right there. And all you really have to do is just surrender and let go and let them speak through you. Now, another thing I want to talk about is the idea of the channeling state. And to begin with that, we'll talk about the geometry. It's known as the Vesica Pisces. These are the two intersecting circles. So the idea is, one of these circles is my consciousness, one of the circles is the guides, and we form this Vesica Pisces. Now, if I contain, as Tyler, impurities and negative energies within my 50% of the equation, the version of the guide that is brought through will reflect that. That will be a part of the channeled persona, that will be a part of the channeled identity that comes through. So the daily spiritual practice, the self-refinement, the energy refinement, purifies my Tyler half of the equation. So whatever I present then as my 50% then yields a pure representation of the guide. It yields a more expanded point of view while in the channeling state. So all types of different things can be divined, all types of different symbols and meanings and stories and lessons can then come through. So when I first began channeling, even though I got some hits, right, like very specific, accurate, new information came through, ultimately I found that the perspective while I was channeling, when I first began, still contained certain degrees of limitation. You know, it wasn't like there was a lot of novel information coming forth. In some cases there were, but sometimes information would come forth that perhaps was a little fear-based, or perhaps information would come forth that maybe wasn't accurate. You know, that happened when I first began. And that's because my 50% contained limitations, contained impurities. So the reason I'm sharing this is, you don't have to have a spiritual practice to channel, But if you really want to get proficient at it, if you really want to develop it, if you really want to bring through higher wisdom, in my personal experience, a daily practice that is designed to evolve your consciousness is essential, because the more refined your 50% can become, the more expansive the guide will be. Now, as Ryuk has oftentimes said, he's a representation of the higher mind, of the higher self. And we all have our own higher mind, higher self, our own form of spiritual guidance that's personal to us as a unique consciousness. And these guides ultimately are assisting all of us in connecting to that dimension of ourselves through their presence. Their energy is reflecting that quality so we can perceive it, we can feel it, we can begin to understand it and embody it. And I want to just really emphasize that, because it's important not to outsource the idea of your own guidance to a channeled entity. It's important to not give your power away to a channeled entity. And what I mean by this is, these beings are here to simply suggest things, they're here to guide us, they're here to share wisdom. They will never tell you what to do. They will never tell you how to live your life. They will never tell you what choice to make, because that's really none of their business. That's your business, and that's your path. So these guides really work to simply reflect back to you guidance and higher energy, so you can more easily walk your own path, so you can more easily see these bigger points of view and ultimately apply them. And the point of the channeling for both myself and the people whom I'm channeling for is that higher self merging. Because if you follow the suggestions of these beings, if you follow your own synchronicities and your own feelings of inner guidance, you will eventually merge with the higher self, and you will have what is called an ego death, where essentially the small self dissolves into the bigger self. And that's really where humanity, in my opinion, is headed. We are essentially moving towards a collective ego death, which enables us all to be reborn as our true selves, so we can create something that hasn't been seen on Earth before in a really powerful and divine way. So I hope this video has been insightful. I hope that you have a great life. I hope that you have a great evening if you're watching this, evening time. And I just want to really encourage you, develop yourself. That's really why we're here. Everything that's a part of this physical world will go away. It will fade. Everything, everyone that we know will disappear. And I'm not saying that to be morbid. I'm just saying that to remind you that the things of the physical reality are ephemeral. But what's eternal is your consciousness. What's eternal is your divine essence. And on Earth, we have a really unique opportunity to refine that essence, which will remain. The evolution that you go through as an incarnated being on Earth is never lost. It lives on. And we have a great opportunity here to really let go of our attachment to the things that don't really matter, the things that really aren't evolving us, so we can move into a direction that ultimately enables us to prosper, not just here on Earth, but also in the dimensions that follow the physical incarnation. And my goal as a guide, you could say, is to give people the practices, the tools, and the information that can enable them to do just that. So I work with people one-on-one. I train people how to channel. I train people in these mystical practices. On my Patreon, I also do weekly classes where we go over these practices, where we do group energy work together to evolve ourselves, to bring abundance, prosperity, blessings into our lives. And I'm making this video not just to share with you some of this information, but to also invite you to develop yourself. You know, if you really feel you want to take the next steps in your own evolution, if you feel you want to become fully autonomous in your life, to not be subject to the different energy currents of the world, but to instead remain grounded and centered in your path, then I encourage you to, reach out to me for sessions if you like, or to just simply create for yourself that practice, whatever that is for you. Create for yourself those rituals that really enable you to evolve your soul and your spirit, because that is the most precious thing you can possibly do for yourself. It is the most essential tool, because it's the master tool. It's you. And as you refine your tool, as you perfect your tool, what you create in the world will be of that energy. It will match the energy of that tool, so you can sculpt and mold your preferred life. And again, that doesn't just apply here on Earth. That's a momentum that continues onward after we let go of our physicality. So I'm going to post some links below to the Patreon. I'll also post my email there. And I hope you all have a fantastic day. My unconditional love and gratitude to each of you. And talk soon.